Hi everyone. It's my greatest pleasure to introduce Nevena Stanić Kovačević, who has been a big force at our FETA Foundation, and she is going to moderate the panel. Nevena.
Welcome to the second online forum. Well, this is a mini university, so it's kind of a forum, but panel that FETA has been organizing during the pandemic. And we'd be very fortunate to have this as a platform to communicate and connect. Today, we will be talking about some aspects of music education from different perspectives. 1 month after going back to school and to our unusual concert life, we may come up with different insights and solutions than in May when we were wondering what's going to happen this fall. Education is an important segment of everyone's maturation and musicianship, and during the present crisis, it's been challenging in different ways to approach education. How we cope with all these challenges and how we turn them to advantages is the main question to deal with today. I invite you to share comments, and I'm thrilled to present you our wonderful panelists today. They will illuminate this topic. They're mostly based in Miami, or they're in some way cooperating and collaborating with people from Miami, but their work is known around the US and internationally. They will briefly present their role in education as well as challenges they faced and changes they needed to make due to the pandemic during the past and present concert season, school year, or as freelancers. So first, I'd like to welcome our returning panelist, Michael Linville, who was here with us in May. Thank you, Michael, for coming back. Now back to school, right? You're the new World Symphony's Dean of Chamber Music and Fellow Department. We were fortunate to hear some of the strategies you've been applying to have your concert season running in a way, and all the activities with fellows at place in May. Can you tell us if something changed and how will you organize this new 2021 season, and how will you accommodate fellows this year?
Sure. Well, as we moved through the summer, it became apparent that we were not going to be able to offer concerts in the usual fashion. We had hoped that we could at least present chamber orchestra repertoire. But it became clear that a lot of our fellows were not comfortable coming back to Miami because of the spike in the virus here. So we made the uncomfortable, difficult decision to go almost completely online, at least through the end of December. So we are doing a lot of Zoom meetings, as you can imagine. And actually, in a sense, this is helping us create more time to do some of the things that we always talk about wanting to do, but can never seem to make time. For example, Michael Tilson-Thomas, our artistic director, is doing a series of the history of the modern orchestra seminars, where he is going back to the very beginnings of orchestral ensembles, and talking about how various composers over the centuries have used this medium to create new art. And eventually we'll get all the way to the current orchestra and probably talk about how this pandemic is going to change orchestras forever. Some of the other projects that we have are a combination of online work with coaches and pre-recorded videos that the fellows are sharing with these coaches to get feedback. So some of it is happening in real time, and some of it is happening in this sort of staggered way where it's sending material back and forth between musicians and coaches. We probably won't have any visitors to speak of until January, and we're still hopeful that we can start resuming our orchestral activities in January. But of course, that remains to be seen. In the meantime, we are presenting concerts, but they're all virtual. They're live performances that are web streamed, but for the moment, we don't have any audience members in the hall. We may be able to activate the park adjacent to us and do wallcasts from the park, but that also requires a certain amount of coordination with the city and extreme sort of disciplined security that it's still not clear if we would be able to provide. So that's where we are. We basically have revamped our calendar and season about 3 times over the course of the summer. But we're happy with where we landed and hopefully keeping the fellows safe, and we'll just keep our fingers crossed that we can start again in January.
Yes, thank you for being so responsible, and we also hope to listen to fantastic concerts at the New World Center. Milica Paranosić is with us today. I pronounce Paranosić like Juraj usually pronounces. You used to be involved in academia for 20 years, and now as a full freelancer, can you make a parallel between your musicianship then and now? How is it different? And especially in this specific situation, how particularly you and composers around you manage their way during this crisis?
Big question. So I think it's like 2 questions maybe. So yeah, for the longest time I found, I've always considered myself to be a freelancer as well as academic person, like within the academic structure. And I always kind of, and I don't know, maybe this is not right to say, but I will say it anyway. I always looked at my academic situation as a stepping stone to freelancing. I know it's kind of like reversed a little bit, but I always wanted, when I was very young, I always wanted to just be a freelancer, and I was talked out of it. I was talked out of it by academics. Like, you can't do that. You have to teach. You have to be within the structure. You have to do it the right way. You have to do it in the right steps. And I gave in, and I probably gave into that because, you know, I probably wouldn't have if I was 16, but when you're 20 something, then you're like, you're already mature enough to make right choices. And so I did, and I didn't regret it, but I always wanted to kind of go back to my dream, and I always felt like it's not the right time. It's not the right time. Let's do a little more. Let's do it. Because I also enjoyed, I enjoyed meeting my students at Juilliard, meeting some of my colleagues there. I enjoyed some of the structure that was offered. And I enjoyed the freedom to create my own story when possible. But after a while, it felt like it was just something that was just there. And it wasn't, you know, I wasn't really revisiting honestly my dream. And I did. A couple of years ago, I decided to just quit my teaching gig at Juilliard, and I had a couple of positions there. I was teaching. I was also running a music tech center, and I was doing some computer support, and I was also organizing a festival. So it was a lot. So I just decided to take all that I learned, and I just kind of offer that to others. So it was not only about me branching out and doing something for me, but it was more about getting all the experiences from Juilliard, 92nd Street Y, and I also taught elsewhere. I taught in Africa, I taught in India, I taught in China. And I taught privately throughout this time. And I also kind of like was working with other new music organizations. Like, this is too fragmented. Why don't I just take all that and make my own organization to kind of sum it all up and spill it out for the people who would find it useful, specifically immigrant women, me being one of them, and having to also deal with cultural issues and visa issues and language issues and all of that stuff. And somehow, even though I waited very long time to make that switch, it kind of made sense when it finally did, because kind of multiple pieces came into play. And I was just, it was not that recent. I run a nonprofit for music and multimedia. It's called Per Academia, like my last name in academia. And it's been going on for about 5 years, but it's only about 3 years since I've quit Juilliard and all the other kind of like working for other people type things. But this summer in particular started to, you know, present not necessarily a problem. I mean, it's problematic in many ways, but I tend to look at problems as challenges, creative challenges, and to see if there is anything we can take out of it and make our lives or our art or our relationships, our music better. And I'm going to be quite honest with you. I'm still there. I'm still listening to what's going on. I'm still listening to what my students are telling me. I'm still listening to my own instincts in terms of like, you know, what is it that we need to do, and not we as a, I mean, yes, we as a community, but also sometimes we have to look inwards and not decide for everybody. You know, sometimes it's like that notion that we have as educators, like, we know what's good for people. We're going to teach that because you're going to learn from that, and you're going to, and it's going to, but it's more, you know, like I'm also listening to what my students are telling me specifically, like, you know, very personal, a very personal level, and also how I feel. And I find out that at this time, people, or at least some of the people in my network, are navigating more towards connecting. Even it's so weird because we are living in the moment of social distancing, but people are navigating towards connecting to each other even more a little bit, because it's not possible. And they're trying to like dig in and, you know, like really like what we're doing right now, really kind of like figure out what each of us is doing, what we're exploring, and how we can make maybe smaller groups that can still get together safely. So that's one of the ways that we can go, is just making gatherings which are smaller in numbers, maybe, until we're able to gather in large groups, but kind of try to preserve that human contact and personal contact if we can.
Okay, I'd like to hear more about Penelope and the Geese later, because that's one of the projects that explains everything you just said, especially at this moment, how it, I'll pass the link to. We were also very fortunate to have Rhett del Campo here, the Executive Director of Seraphic Fire. Thank you so much, Rhett, for coming and joining us. I'm going to pass your bio here and everyone's biographies in the chat box. And I'll ask you, because, you know, this is quite of a specific situation, but cherishing choral sound and having such a fine institution and a fine choir here in Florida seems like quite of a challenge. How is the auditioning looks like now? And also, what are some of the aspects of Seraphic's involvement in education in Florida, which is one of the important segments of Seraphic Fire in general, aside of the concerts and concert life?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. Hello, Michael, by the way. I used to be a New World Fellow, so Michael used to be one of my coaches. Well, I wanted to start with education. I think it's an area where we've grown a lot, and we have a weekly program in the Miami-Dade County Public Schools. We work with 8 different public schools. We bring our artists come from all over the country, and in a typical year, we'd be bringing them into the schools when they're here. We've also grown into the college education realm with a partnership with UCLA. We have 8 ensemble artists or students at UCLA that work with the artists here in Miami when we're presenting concerts. And we also have a professional choral institute at the Aspen Music Festival in school. There have been, of course, many challenges, just the obvious. We can't actually present the programs, and as many of you know, singing is considered one of the more risky activities you can take on. One of the things we're learning, especially with our youth education, is unlike New World Symphony, you know, we don't have technology. We lack technology in every way. So we're trying to figure out and learn how to create our educational programs in such a way that they can be interactive with the students. And that's a challenge we're still working to get through. And we have about a month until our first quote unquote in-school presentation, but we're also told that the students are not allowed to sing in school currently. So we are also trying to figure out, you know, can they hum? What can we teach them? How can we create something online where it still is interactive and we can interact with the students? There is a takeaway in that we're excited about the possibility, if we are able to create a successful youth education program that can be presented online, it's something we can take to the national level. And since we do have artists all around the country, we can implement this program in different elementary school systems, in different disadvantaged communities anywhere in the nation. So that is something hopeful that may come out of this. Artistically, right now we're committed to presenting what we're calling a multimedia season, and we're in the middle of some really complicated excuse me, rehearsals where we have artists who are at their computers like we are now, but spread all around the country, and figure out how we can rehearse a piece of music together. And there's actually technology that we're becoming familiar with where you can actually sing in unison, and this technology factors in the delay based on your distance and make it sound almost like you're singing in unison, which is quite interesting. And instead of talking about the challenges, I'll talk about the positive takeaway for this technology, and that given the way we operate, we bring our artists in, say on a Sunday, maybe 13 to 20 artists, and we rehearse very intensely for 3 days, and then we have 4 or 5 performances. And then that week is over, everyone goes home. Now that we're figuring out through technology how to rehearse distantly, we realized, hey, if we can really make an artistic product from this process that is as good as what we present in person, we can limit the amount of time that we need to have our artists here in South Florida, which reduces expenses for us and reduces the amount of time our artists are traveling away from home. So I think there's a lot of positives that we can take away from this. But I'll end by saying I think there is no replacement for working with our artists and our students in person, and that's what music is meant for. So I'm also being careful with my organization. I don't want to waste time chasing after technology and finding solutions to temporary problems when, you know, eventually I do think the best way to continue doing what we do through the arts is interacting in person.
Yeah, sounds promising in a way, but we hope that we'll be able to listen to the wonderful interpretations your choir offers very soon. One of your fellow composers was our next panelist, Benjamin Montgomery. Last but not least, Ben is pretty much involved in electronic music, so I'm sure he knows about some gadgets that can help us bear the situation. Also, he graduated this year, and he can proudly say that he is one of the 2020 graduates this specific year. He was also on a job market this year, and he started teaching on a new position at the University of Miami, Frost School of Music. So Ben, please tell us all about all that.
So it's been an interesting experience for sure, especially being on the job market rate at the time when everything was climaxing, to see just kind of job postings just disappear and be withdrawn. It puts you in a very interesting mindset. So I feel very fortunate that I am able to return to Miami in the university and teach here. And I also am teaching in the preparatory program at Frost as well. So I'm I'm very glad that I have these chances to remain in contact with musicians and be in the environment. And so it's a very interesting experience to teach, because largely a lot of my teaching is virtual. At the University of Miami, it's a hybrid situation where I have students in person and virtually, where one thing I'm appreciating as I'm trying to be optimistic and take what we can out of this is the self-reflection that all of this brings on into our personal teaching styles, the different things that it highlights that we can then bring to our teaching in the future when hopefully things return to in person. Maybe some things will remain in a virtual format. Like, for instance, it really highlights to me how much time we spend speaking as instructors, especially over the virtual format. You don't get the luxury of being in person and maintaining their engagement just because you're there. It's really easy to see the students kind of zone out on the screen. And one thing I very much like is whenever we're in class, to view things in the gallery view. So the students aren't just focusing on you as the teacher, but they're focusing on each other. And it changes their perspective. Largely as a teacher, we spend time, in introducing material and then reading the body language and facial expressions of the students. So the students that I have in person, they have face masks on, and I've realized how much of the facial expressions really plays a part of how I respond or how quickly we proceed. Whether, there's the students that look like they have a question, but they're not really asking it. Whereas the Zoom students, even though they're virtual, I can see their faces. So in that sense, it still works. I think for me, largely teaching music theory, we have to really emphasize engaging activities, because it's on one hand, I think maybe one of the easier disciplines to teach virtually, but on the other hand, it's also one that we have to be careful doesn't remain purely academic and disassociated from the music and our concepts. The students need to feel the concepts in action and in performance. And I hear them talking not just about class, but about their outside experiences, how they miss kind of those live interactions of performing music and actually feeling it. So they're already kind of coming into class with that predisposition. So it just completely resituates the perspective of us as a teacher, how much time we really need to spend talking. Maybe in the past we've taken advantage of having the students there in person, and we can really do better to create more activities that, like I said, take advantage of the fact that they are there and they can participate. And they're all largely very smart students, so they don't need to sit there and listen to us talk the whole time. To making a more collaborative classroom experience is something that I think this is really highlighted for me, and I look forward to exploring as we go on. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, education is also the diversity. It's one of the main aspects of it. That's how we learn, by being familiar with something that we don't know, right? And I would like to ask particularly Milica, but also everybody else can join later, how much diversity is important. Recently we had many argues and discussions about international students in the US and their role and their status, and whether they will be whether the education will be accessible to them or not, how much that changes education and the system. And maybe you can connect it with your opera, or you say it's more manifesto, Penelope and the Geese. I will post the link. You can learn more about it in the chat box.
Like that, the immigration first and the diversity also along with it, and on all the issues that are elevated today, they all have been around obviously for a long time, but they all have been pretty much part of my, living and growing up. Also, like even in Serbia, before I left, the whole split up of the country happened, and the whole, thinking of yourself as a Yugoslavian and all of a sudden having to declare as a Serbian, then coming here and being an immigrant, whereas everybody's from somewhere else. So for me, that was always part of who I was, is, kind of different ethnicities mingling together and growing together and learning together. And that was never something that you notice as an anomaly or as a tendency or as a good or a bad thing. It just is. So for me, the new accent on it right now, when it's like kind of like under the magnifying light, is in a way just, you know, I was always thinking like that. I'm just trying to focus my activities around the ability to maybe lend a hand to some of the international students who don't know where to even begin when they arrive to the States. So, and to provide some performing opportunities, education opportunities, and even professional, like in salaried positions. So that's what I'm trying to do. But in a sense, there's nothing new in it for me.
I invite you to just briefly tell me your impression of, or suggestion, or idea, or goal of your institution in the future. Where do you see music education? Where do you see the future of concert seasons in a sense of repertoire, in a sense of curricula? There were many discussions lately about white supremacy in education, in music education. And I would say today, whether that's like a coincidence or not, we have 50+% of male, white, Western panelists. Well, for your perspective is also important to hear. How do you see the future of music education? Or if you had the power, how your mini university would look like?
Well, I'm happy to jump in. As I mentioned, we at the New World Symphony revamped our season a number of times over the summer because of the varying possibilities that we were able to consider. And obviously at the same time, this was all happening in our country. So we took that opportunity to really start doing deep dive research into composers, diverse composers, both gender and race diversity, and were able to fairly quickly make a bunch of changes. And now our season, in terms of the programming, reflects hopefully a much broader range of human beings in the music that we're presenting, and we're very proud of that. We have been pushing to increase our diversity among the fellowship as well as our staff, and it's frankly sometimes challenging, especially in the recruitment process. But I do feel like we're making some great strides, and our orchestra and staff is looking more diverse than it ever has. So hopefully we can just keep moving in that direction. And then the other part of that equation is really giving children a leg up in terms of their education and the opportunities that they are presented once they make decisions about what their next steps will be, whether it's college or other choices that they make.
Thank you.
I think it's, so me from the teaching perspective, I don't have as much control over performance repertoire and that sort of thing. So it's largely takes into account all of the different examples that I present to students and that we talk about in class. And for me, I think a lot of that begins with a larger curricular design change, because presenting diverse examples in order to do it coherently requires a way to fit them all together within the curriculum. So not just maintaining the standard flow and inserting examples here and there, because I think that lends towards doing a disservice to each of those new styles. It doesn't give them the chance to really present themselves on their own right. It's already coming from our white European perspective. So I think for me, at least starting with that larger curricular design, and then rethinking each of the concepts, and then about how each style presents it differently or approaches the same kind of perceptual issue, and comes to different conclusions or different intentions through the styles. So I guess from the top down is how I think finding that change in the way to increase the diversity of the repertoire. And then I'm sure that students will all have their own very interesting and diverse responses to that repertoire, and it will lead to discussions, which then years down the road will lead to the programming of more diverse repertoire.
And in the concert hall, Rhett, please tell us, you have a diverse repertoire from Scandinavian composers to Baroque composers. How do you see reactions of the audiences, or do you have any other idea to tell us about this?
Well, interesting timing of your question. We just had our board retreat today, and the entire day was really spent talking about diversity in both our education, but also in the art form. And I'll just share with you a question that we addressed. When talking about diversity, does that mean that the music that reflects the underrepresented cultures better should be performed by Seraphic Fire? Or should we be telling people that the European-dominated classical music field should be adopted by people of color? And you already pointed this out. I mean, in a lot of the music we perform, we do focus on different cultures. We did program of Russian choral music, Korean choral music the past couple of years. But we've also talked about, if we want our audience to be diverse, we need to present a diverse group of artists. And how do you do that? And then we started going back to our education programs. And it's easy to say we reach a very different group when we talk about the 3rd through 5th graders that we work with that are predominantly Black and Haitian. But what happens after we finish our program after the 5th grade? What happens to them? So I don't have an answer other than what we are trying to address is how can we continue working with those students, and even if it's just one class, but steward them through music education into middle school and then high school and then into college and into some of our college programs and make them accessible. We don't have that answer, but I think the one thing we have going for us is that singing doesn't require you to buy an instrument or a uniform. You can join a volunteer choir anywhere. So there's a lot of opportunity to create a more diverse, not just artists, but audience members through our education programs, because we can limit the barrier to entry because you don't have to buy an instrument, as I said.
For the sake of time, Milica, let's have your 3 minutes of this mini university lecture speak for itself. I'll thank you all and wish you all the best at your future endeavors to make music accessible to all of us.